We're just going to start with a quick intro about Fall River, and then John's going to discuss some of the combined sewer infrastructure and sewer upgrades that have been done over the last few years. Valerie's going to touch on her ongoing GIS and fieldwork that she's been working on for a number of years now. And then I'll come back on and discuss how the city plans on implementing the MS4 program moving forward, as well as some lessons learned that have occurred over the last few years.
So basically, we're a much larger town than, or city than Yarmouth was. We've got about 90,000 residents. We're one of 24 communities in the state of Massachusetts that has combined sewers. 3/4 of our sewers are combined, which means only 1/4 of our system is under the MS4 system, and that is why I'm going to be doing most of my talking about CSOs. We initially started our sewer system back in 1857. A lot of our sewer system is that old. Back then, what did we do? We took the wastewater from the neighborhood and we discharged it directly to the receiving water. That's what we did. In 1948, we started to build our modern-day wastewater treatment system. We built a primary plant down on the Taunton River, and we built a couple of pump stations, a couple of large pump stations actually. They're still in use today, and we converted all of those outfalls to CSO'S, Combined Sewer Overflows. And then in 1978, okay, we got some money from the federal government, and back then, you know, we got 75% grants from the feds and another 15% grants from the state of Massachusetts, and we're actually able to upgrade our primary plant to a secondary treatment plant that was able to treat about 50 million gallons a day. We also took that money and finally upgraded those two big pump stations. They, at that point in time, really needed it. Then we really didn't do very much more until the early 1990s, when we basically got sued. And yeah, we actually got forced to create a CSO abatement plan. And since 1997, we've basically been forced to almost have blinders on and spend all of our efforts on that CSO abatement plan. The reason I say that is because we had to spend $185 million to upgrade our system to take care of our CSOs. And what did that $185 million give us? Well, we got some upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant. We upgraded our 54 million gallon plant to be able to handle 106 million gallons of wet weather flow. We improved our solids handling a little bit, but most of this money was spent digging a great big hole in the ground. Let's take a step back. I know a lot of the communities are not combined sewers, but what is a combined sewer? Well, normally what you have is your residential flow is going to go into your sewer line and go into your interceptor on its way to the treatment plant it gets treated, and then goes to the receiving water. Well, what happens in a combined system is the wet weather flow from your roof drains, from your catch basins, everything goes into the same conduit, the same pipe that transferred your domestic flow to your treatment plant. But now you've got all of that additional flow from your stormwater. And it very quickly builds up in the plant and overflows everything. So what do you do with all that extra water? Well, you have this weir here that it's a very simple weir that allows the excess water to go into your receiving stream. Hopefully that works. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you also have some, I don't know, bottlenecks in the system. When I was showing this plant, this picture to my director as I'm trying to put the presentation together, he looked at this and said, I know just exactly when that was. Now, I wasn't here when this happened, so I have to go back and tell you. But as soon as he saw this picture, he looked at it and said, on September 15th, 2012, this is Stafford Square in our city, we got 1.22 inches of rain in 15 minutes. This is not the only place in the city that this happened to. What is supposed to happen to all of that water? Well, that little black dot that I showed you before where that weir was, this is an actual weir. It's nothing spectacular. It's very, very low tech. The water comes down. You don't see it here, but just over here, there's a 24-inch diameter sewer that interceptor that goes directly to the wastewater treatment plant. The water will build up here to the point where it overtops this weir, and at this point in time we have sensors so we know when it's happening, and Valerie goes out very often to maintain those, and up until very recently download the data from those so that we have all of the reporting that we need to for number one, for our own and also for EPA. But if you notice, the conduit going out to the receiving stream was pretty big. That's probably a 72-inch or larger outfall. So the big hole in the ground ended up being a deep rock tunnel. It's a 20-foot diameter, 3 miles long, and up to 100 feet deep. We've got 9 drop shafts, and okay, so you can see where the drop shafts are, and they each pick up a large portion of the city, and that way we can determine what goes into that tunnel, what needs to go into that tunnel, and we can, with the tunnel, we can pick up a 6-inch rainfall if we need to. We've got a 38 million gallon storage in there, and what happens is once we get the rainfall in there, here's the treatment plant down here, we bleed it back into the treatment plant until that flow goes down. So this here is the tunneling machine that drilled our big hole in the ground. This is the tunnel just before we put it in line. The contractor was nice enough to take out all of the electric lights and conduits, so we wouldn't fry ourselves. But that was the big one. But that's not the only thing that we're doing, because that's not going to help every neighborhood. This is up these two screening and disinfection facilities are up the north end of the city, and basically what they're doing is we couldn't get the tunnel over there, so instead of just letting those areas continue to discharge to the Taunton River, we put a screening and disinfection facility, so whatever goes through there is actually got a rudimentary primary treatment. Oops. So what's next for us is those two areas that we have those primary treatment. We're also going to be doing some sewer separation. And over the next 10 years or so, we're going to be spending about $24 million in this area and then another $17 million in that area. And so that's our CSOs. I know we're here all to talk about MS4s, and so I'm going to bring up Valerie, and she's going to talk to you about basically what she has been doing over the last 3 years.
Hello, I'm Valerie. As you know, like I said, Fall River does have both the CSO and the MS4s. Even though it might only be 25% separated, that 25% is sort of scattered throughout the entire city and almost intermixed within the CSO areas. So even on this map, let's see, is that the light? Okay. If you can see right here, there's these little green squares intermixed with all the orange. Orange is our separate systems, and then the green is our sewer system, and so we actually still have some combined sewer catch basins right in the middle of where we had separate stuff. So it's a fun job trying to figure out where things are separate and where they're not. So the mapping and catchment delineation has been a bit of a challenge. We definitely get use out of getting all the layers that you can, like the hydrology, DEMs, get 2-foot contours, aerial imagery, even taking advantage of Google Street View and anything else you can to locate and map out all of the stuff that you have in your systems. I use all that information to, A, make sure all the mapping is correct, and go out and then do all the field surveying as well. Having the assessor's parcel base is good. You definitely need to have a nice updated one. So, yeah. The BMPs, all this stuff definitely comes in handy. The sewer and MS4 system, as I was saying, has, right now I feel like we're about 95% mapped in the public stuff, anything that's owned by the city. Where I'm still trying to get things in are the private systems and maybe the stuff from the highways, et cetera, so that everything is mapped, because there might be areas where we have our system goes through a private system and then back to a public system, or it goes through the highway system and then back to a public system. So we have to get all this information mapped, and there's still a few gaps in there that we're trying to get all that information in. The field surveys with the GPS, I have created things to use on the GPS that allow for easier, when I'm getting the data, it imports into the GIS system quite readily into the all the fields, data fields that you need in like a UGAM. So that's been quite a big help there. The as-built, if you can get a hold of them, are extremely crucial. That's been a bit tough getting all the as-built. we tend to get the preliminary maps and not as many as-builts at times. Which one goes forward? Okay. Whenever we're doing outfall screening and catchment investigation, when I first got started on this, we tried to go out and do the pre-screening and the sampling and everything all on the same day. And the water samples that need to go out at that time, we were having to send everything out to a lab. And of course, not just the lab fees, but scheduling the lab pickups and everything else, you had like a narrow window of about 2 hours to go out, grab your samples, get them back to the office so that the place could pick it up and drive it to Connecticut or whatever to get it sampled, screened. That made for a very difficult ability when you have only a 2-hour window to grab your water samples. So I started implementing where I would do a dry run. Then I could get up to, like he was saying, about 20 outfalls screened, because I'd go around with a bunch of maps and the GPS, and I'd get all the pictures and do all this dry screening where I'm looking for all of the physical, olfactory, visual, all of those type of things to try to screen it, decide, see what kind of condition it's in, and does it need anything, and all that stuff. And while you're there, and hopefully it's a dry weather at that time, and you can see if there's any flow anywhere, and then you mark all the ones that have any sort of flow that you need to go back to, and then you try to schedule okay, I have 4 out of the 20 that I just looked at that I need to get samples from, and then you schedule that and go get them all, and then you can get them within your little 2-hour window, and it worked out really well. The pictures there, we have. This one here was actually probably one of the most beautiful outfalls I've ever seen. The people that owned the yard, it's not even their responsibility, but they like lined it with rocks and keep it nice and clean. And I mean, it's just, it was a beautiful outfall. I was like, wow, this is the most beautiful outfall I've ever seen. And then, of course, we have some that are in areas that are hard to reach. And this one, although it receives a lot of flow and it's technically about an 18-inch opening, only had about 9 inches left because it continually fills up with sediment. So this one's on one of our high maintenance lists. And the fact that I've been out to this one many times to monitor, has it filled up again? Do we need to get back out there? And that's one of the things that you do when you're out there, is you find out how often these things have to be done. This one here is goes to a pond, retention pond, or I'm not actually. I think this particular one at the end of Moss Road, I don't think it's a man-made retention pond. I think it's like a natural pond, and it's built up with sediment over the years to the point where now this outfall is always surcharged. This is never not surcharged. And I think this is one of those areas that has restrictions on being able to go in and clean that out because it's the wetlands, et cetera. So this is one of those things that you can run into. Otherwise, and this actually has caused some of our flooding issues due to the fact that this line is always surcharged, so the flow can't get through it as well as it needs to during heavy rains. Whenever we are out, I have ran into problem areas where you see either trash or broken pipes, or you actually do run into illicit connections upon occasion. And of course, all these areas, you immediately try to get your samples as fast as you can, and then you try to go back, or you start going back up the line, popping manholes and catch basins, and try to track where it's coming from. Sometimes it's a very easy fix, sometimes it's not. Once you get all your information that you can and literally try to determine exactly the cause, then you get all that information to the city so they can do whatever remediation needs to be done. And or reporting to where I work to get the collections crew or whomever out for maintenance and whatnot. So then, this happens to be, these are all tires. So some of the issues encountered are things like illegal dumping. This was in the area that's sort of, it's out in the industrial park area, and it's sort of a non-developed section. You don't have like residential stuff out there. And because it's sort of off in the way, there's a few detention ponds, and I was checking the outfalls there, and literally just south of it, because the road has like a downhill slope, apparently everybody goes out there to dump their tires and roll them off the road edge. Anyway, so that information went back, and DPW went out and cleaned that up. And there was over 31 tires that I counted, and I lost count after a while, and I was like, okay. I've seen areas where, you know, obviously there's street litter, because we have a variety of either the MS4 and the combined sewer. I just make note of everything I see everywhere I go, regardless of whether or not it's an MS4 or CSO, and I just get it all reported, because it's, sometimes you might have it on the map as a catch basin that goes to sewer, and then turn around and find out that no, that actually tied to the storm drain, or vice versa. We have some that we think tied to the storm drain, and find out that no, they're actually still tied to the sewer line. So it's, you just treat it all like it's an MS4 to be safe. I've found many unmapped structures that I haven't come across, you know, that we didn't have it in the system. I get those put in. There's obviously a lot of areas where there's a lack of maintenance because the system is so old. You have detention ponds or pipes that just, they haven't even, we're finding things that they don't even remember are out there. You know, it's been there since 1850, and nobody even knows it's still there. And we're like finding those things and mapping them. When it comes to the illicit connections, it's not always that somebody has tied their sewer line to a storm drain. It could be that a nearby, septic tank leaking and somehow getting in. We've had somebody's lateral that just happened to pass over the top of a storm drain line, and it leaked through the seam of the storm drain line. And we had to find that out with CCTV. It could be a lot of things, or it's people dumping. So obviously when people are dumping in things like dumping it directly into the catch basin, or there's a lot of dumping that people do that they don't even think about as being wrong, and that would be like the lawn trimmings and the leaves, and they can clog up your detention and retention ponds. So that's always been a bit of an issue. And I guess that's about it. Again, the fact that our system is from 1857 has been a bit of a challenge. Thank you.
All right, John and Valerie, thank you very much. So your reward for doing a nice job so far on your $185 million project is an upcoming $334 million project over the next 20 years. So we'll have you back in another 20 years and you can talk to us again. But that's kind of another story. So where is the city going as far as their MS4 stormwater work? So they're looking at doing basically a three-step program. Step one is figuring out what they have in place. Step two, where do they have to go? And then most importantly, who is going to be doing the work and how is it going to be done? So as far as what they've done, we've probably heard most of this already, but they're already inspecting their outfalls about every 3 years, averaging about 60 per year. Valerie has extensive field work and field sampling experience, and also extensive mapping and GIS capabilities. So that particular part of the system is in good shape. And as we heard earlier from Newt, that minimum measure 6, cleaning catch basins and sweeping streets, is also a very big cost driver for the program. They're already doing at least most of that work right now. So how are they going to implement the new program? Well, for them, their particular goal was obviously meet the permit requirements at the minimum cost, probably very similar to most communities here and throughout Massachusetts. For Fall River, at least, that translated to maximizing the use of in-house resources to implement program requirements. And this leads to division of work. So who's going to do these different amounts of work? City, consultant, or a cooperative effort. So what does the city need help with? Well, they need help getting a lot of their written plans and procedures in place. So these would be things like the written stormwater management plan, the written IDDE plan, and other plans and procedures that are generally required within the earlier part of the permit. So the general plan is that a consultant will go in, sort of set up their program, get all the written items in place, and then they can implement the vast majority of it in-house. So for instance, the cooperative task, now you're kind of blending, okay, was going to be a blending of efforts between a consultant and the city. So for instance, the IDDE training, the consultant will probably develop a training program, give a training, and sort of train the trainers. So we'll come in, or consultant will come in, train you guys how to train your people, you guys can actually do the program and then take it from there. Similar to the BMP inspection, so rather than paying a consultant to go and do the actual inspections yearly, we would go in and train the city or whoever's going to be involved how to do it, say run through a field exercise with the sheets, and then you guys can take it over, and that's going to save the cost by keeping those expenses using in-house people. Ordinances and regulations, so here you'd have a consultant basically review what's in place for ordinances and regulations, provide a draft markup or perhaps some sample items, then the city can take it and go through their process. And the annual report's going to be kind of a similar thing. So you start off having the consultant do it, and eventually the city will do it internally. So what can the city do in-house? Obviously field work and their GIS mapping, more than capable of doing that. Valerie, you're the boots on the ground there, and you can go, you know that system probably better than anyone else. And maintenance, sweeping, catch basin cleaning, you have a lot of in-house people and a lot of in-house apparatus, trucks and that thing. So a lot of these items can be kept in-house rather than, say, outsourcing it. SWIP implementation and system maintenance also using in-house people. So funding. The city actually has a stormwater utility that was enacted back in 2008 as part of a funding mechanism to implement that $185 million CSO program. Translates to about $160 per year for residents, and this is also the $160 ERU, or equivalent residential unit. And for those that don't know, basically a stormwater utility, you pay based off of your impervious area. So what it does is it allows you to have, say, your larger commercial and industrial users with higher amounts of impervious area to pay more, because they're paying $160 per 2,800 square feet of impervious area, whereas residents are only paying it once. And there's some credits and discounts that may be available depending on different scenarios, but in fiscal year 2015, it generated $4.7 million in revenue, and they did have close to 1,000 appeals. So real quick, just the lessons learned so far. Field work is time consuming and the weather doesn't cooperate. If you're trying to do dry weather, it's going to rain, and if you want it to rain, it's going to be July and it's not going to rain for months. Stormwater utility is very difficult and very time consuming to implement. That took years to pass from when that was initially conceived to actual passing. Bylaws and ordinances, also same thing, very time consuming. And as you can imagine, managing rain is pretty expensive, and managing sewage is really expensive. For Fall River, about $500 million over a 40-year period.